Hello, everybody. It's Lenny Murphy with another edition of our CEO series. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend it with myself and my guests. And today I'm joined by Matt Britton, founder and CEO of Suzy. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you. So I have followed the progression of Suzy all the way back in the Crowd Tap days for a long time, and think it's just a great story. So I'll let you tell it in your words to kind of give your origin story so our listeners can get as grounded in the business as I am.
Yeah, so our company is really interesting. The origins of Suzy actually dates back to 2002 when I founded a marketing services business first called Mr. Youth, which later became named MRY. And MRY was one of the first social media marketing firms that existed right at the dawn of the social media era. So to give you context, like I personally registered at Visa for Visa on Twitter, so helped establish social media practices for companies like Visa and Coca-Cola and Microsoft in the 2006 through 2008 period. And when we rebranded as MRY, one of the things we did is we created software to help manage and measure the earliest iterations of influencers or creators, if you will. A lot of them were college student reps and other people who wanted to essentially represent brands on campus or in their community and earn rewards for doing so. And before that, we were just managing them via Excel spreadsheets, and that became a little wonky, right? And what started to happen was a lot of other agencies and publishers asked if they could license our software. And I saw a business opportunity there. So I decided to spin out this company, which was named CrowdTap, into its own business, put in the CEO, and help that company raise their Series A in funding way back in 2011. I continued to run the agency, which eventually became acquired by the Publicis Group. I did my earn out of the Publicis Group through about 2015. And then at that point, the board had asked me to come to rejoin CrowdTap. I never was really running it full time, but I'd incubated in my agency and to basically take over the company as CEO. And in 2016, out of 2016, after a lot of back and forth, decided to do so. And when I joined CrowdTap, the business was not in a good place. CrowdTap's business model had evolved. They essentially were offering a service to let brands easily get into the news feed by essentially having a network of what they called creators, but early influencers, essentially take pictures with the brand or create content with the brand and share it, on Facebook at that point. But unfortunately for CrowdTap at that point, programmatic tools from Facebook were just surfacing, and there were much easier ways for brands to just buy ads and get in the news feed with what they created. So having a platform that incentivized users to post content just kind of slightly fell out of favor. And the company had taken on some debt. They didn't raise a next round, and they'd taken debt, and the interest was hard to service. And they weren't really in a good position in terms of their place in the market. They were almost positioned themselves as a media company, but at the same time fancied themselves as a SaaS platform. But companies were really just buying them to get impressions. So I knew that the company was in desperate need of reinvention, and it was running out of money and quickly. So the first thing I did when I joined in 2016 is I took the staff down from 110 people to 30, which was never an easy thing to do. Some of those people I knew from back in my agency days when we were first incubating the business, but I had to do what I had to do to keep the business alive. And I quickly jumped on the phone with all the customers that CrowdTap had. And the only ones that were really happy with the service were using CrowdTap for a different purpose than what the company was marketing itself as. Instead of them using CrowdTap to generate user-generated content, they were using kind of this very sneaky little tool within CrowdTap that allowed companies to do polling. So instead of asking CrowdTap's user base, which at that point had about 1 million US consumers on it, to create content, they were asking them for feedback on packages or ideas or new ads. And those are the only customers that were happy using CrowdTap. So I made the tough decision to essentially pivot the entire business. That polling business was only 5% of the revenue. It was doing about 10 million in revenue. About 500,000 was in this, what was called CrowdTap Insights at that point. And I decided to basically move away from the 9.5 million and focus on the $500,000 in revenue, because I saw that as really a solid foundation to build on. It was a much bigger total addressable market, market research that is. And even though I didn't know anything about it, I still don't know too much about it relative to a lot of my peers, but I knew enough about it because I was actually using CrowdTap when I was running my agency to test concepts to pitch clients to. So I knew kind of the benefits of having a quick, easy tool to get consumer feedback. And what I had seen throughout my agency life was that so many CMOs were making decisions in the dark without the benefit of data. So made the decision to pivot. I also knew we needed to rebrand the company because CrowdTap had been around for too long at that point to just say they were doing something else out of the blue. So decided to keep the CrowdTap name for our consumer panel or audience. It turned into a panel, and rebrand the B2B brand as Suzy. And we launched in 2018, early 2018 at South by Southwest, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really glad that we went down that path, because I think that it's fascinating when you hear how companies just pivot and evolve from the original vision.
A lot of people think that it's just, you start a business, you see other people on Instagram, quote unquote, killing it. And, they think it's just, you're going to start a business and there you go. But, Suzy was an overnight success, really 2 decades in the making, if you will, because again, it dates back to when I started an agency 20 years ago, 22 years ago now.
Well, and, it was interesting too. So full disclosure for the audience, this, when you went with private equity, I was involved in doing a competitive assessment, the private equity backers. And the reason I bring that up is that you were kind of a best kept secret, right? You weren't really engaged with the broader research industry.
Because I wasn't in it.
As much. Right. I get that. I
didn't have the curse of knowledge. I think that helped us. I think when we started, I was almost too dumb to know otherwise, because if I knew everything that I know today about the research industry, I never would have started. Like, why would we enter a space against a SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics or these companies that have much more sophisticated tools and methodologies? I didn't know anything about it. And I think sometimes there is a curse of knowledge where you know too much and that stops you from diving in. And I think Suzy is a great example of that.
I would agree. Well, and the tunnel vision of, well, this is how it's done. But you guys went about things in a very different way. Even back in the CrowdTap day, when I was aware that you were had a research component, well, that's amazing, right? Let's tap into this specific population. Is it going to be good for everything? No, absolutely not. So, but for testing concepts, those type of things that are aligned more towards agencies and marketing, even at that time, I thought that's a really brilliant idea. It was, very, very innovative overall. And I've seen that continue to progress,
of course,
across Suzy. So hats off. I think that's great, and you guys have accomplished a hell of a lot in the intervening time, and continue. So my perspective as well. Often, when companies get to the private equity stage, you don't see as much of a focus on innovation, consolidation, those type of things. Right? It's about driving growth, but that has not been the Suzy story. I have seen you guys continue to drive new solutions, adopt AI, early out of the gate. You just recently launched Suzy Speaks, the voice platform. So what's that been like in continuing to kind of maintain this attitude that you came from of like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but this seems to make sense. Let's do this and see what happens, and it being successful. Versus we're just going to focus on arbitrage and it's just about EBITDA and that's all, it's just financial management versus really driving growth.
So a couple of things I want to clarify. So the private equity investment you're referring to was not a majority buyout, which generally happens when private equity comes in. It was actually their growth equity fund where they gave us growth capital. A lot of times what you'll see companies do is they say, oh, we just raised $200 million, but no, it means private equity came in and bought out the majority of the company for $200 million. And when that happens, yes, often the innovation goes out the door in favor of financial efficiency and financial engineering. When HIG Capital came in, it was their growth fund, and that money went on our balance sheet with a growth mentality. So we are not majority owned by any private equity firm. And even if we were, I don't think I would run a business that way because I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I'm a builder. I've started and sold many businesses, and I do it at this point in my career because I love innovating. I love building on behalf of brands. I have a passion for the consumer. Another point I want to add as you talk about our evolution is in 2020, a woman named Katie Gross, who I brought on, who's now our president, I brought her on because I realized that as we went upstream in the market research industry, my kind of naivete wasn't enough, right? I needed somebody who actually knew the research industry front and back, and that is Katie. And she has since built a tremendous team of people who come from the research establishment, companies like, Kantar and Ipsos and Nielsen and, who are born and bred market researchers. And I think one of the beautiful things about Suzy is it's kind of like peanut butter and jelly combo of people like me who come from the advertising industry that are storytellers that understand the consumer, and people like Katie that are research experts. And when you put those two things together, I think then you unlock kind of the sophistication and domain expertise of research with the power of storytelling. And I think that's how Suzy has continued to be successful at scale.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So to answer your question, how do we keep innovating? Well, it's hard to do the larger you get, because, companies kind of get into a routine and you end up having more layers, and it's easy to slow down. I think about 18 months ago, when AI first came onto the scene, the first thing I did is gave it to our engineers to figure out, and we didn't really get anywhere. Like, I think it's a very hard thing for engineers to figure out, because it's not a new technology like mobile or social. It is a whole new realm of the way that humans interface with technology. So I basically took matters in my own hands, so to speak, and learned how to code and learn how to build an AI. I'm not an engineer by trait, but I kind of figured it out. And I first started to build things for myself personally. Like I built a health bot, which can help me stay alive longer, right? And I took then a lot of the things that I was successful in an approach for building things on my own, and I applied it to Suzy. And the first thing I start to do is help drive a series of internal tools that allow Suzy to work more efficiently. And then over time, start to kind of direct a lot of that focus towards improving our product. And that's how we ended up at a place where Suzy Speaks, which is an AI generated, moderator that essentially conducts qualitative research at scale. And that's one of many new features that Suzy's rolled out with to really kind of embrace some of the incredible opportunities that AI unlocks in the market research industry.
Yeah. So if you look at the competitive set, right? Obviously, everybody's rolling out some version of AI, and the easy thing was the efficiency, the internal efficiency.
Yeah, of course.
Components. And the second, I would say
easy though, but Leonard, on a lot of, you go by Leonard or Lenny?
Yeah, Lenny, Matt. Yeah.
Lenny. So a lot of companies aren't doing it. They're talking about it, but they're not really rolling out internal efficiency and internal productivity tools the way that I see our company doing. There's a lot of talk and not too much action when you peel back the layers of the onion. But that being said, go on. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. And we've seen what I have seen that where it has been done is, from a product standpoint, has been the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Transcription, right?
Right. Summarize answers, things like that.
Right. And now we're seeing from an analysis standpoint of, the expansion to data analysis. We hadn't seen much of people changing methodology, not in the established players. And Suzy is an established player now, right? But yeah, you're different than that. You have been rolling out new methodologies, new approaches to engage within the insights process.
Yeah.
Which is, refreshing. So when you think about the future of, if we can call you a leader from an innovation standpoint, and I think that is a fair statement, where do you see this going? Because fundamentally, you are a research company, you are a research platform that enables lots of different ways to engage with consumers, quant and qual, and those boxes we tend to think about. But things are changing now.
Yes, they are.
So what does that look like for you, without giving away your secret sauce?
Yeah. So I think if you look at the history of market research, back in the day, somebody would knock on a door to door, and capture surveys. And then when the telephone was invented, there was telephone surveys. And then in the age of direct mail, people did direct mail surveys. And then of course, in the 90s, you had mall intercept surveys. And then in 2000, when this thing called the internet was proliferated, obviously the market research industry saw a great opportunity to kind of take market research to a new level. And that's where companies like SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics, who are real pioneers in our space, adopted these kind of complex tools that they built on their own to really allow companies to splice and dice data in a million different ways. And the best way to get human feedback into those systems were through surveys, right? And if you think about surveys, they aren't really a natural way of humans giving feedback. Like if you traveled somewhere really cool, right? Say you went to Mexico on a vacation, and I asked you, how was your trip to Mexico? You wouldn't fill out a survey and give it back to me. You would tell me about it. And you say, I love this place. I didn't really like this place, etc. The reason that surveys exist is that they really fit perfectly into a very rigid analysis format, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, however, AI is that next realm. So just like the internet changed, research and brought on this new way of, intensive, methodology and research, I actually think AI is going to generate the next wave of the ways that companies actually interact with humans to get feedback. And I actually think that's going to be a much more human, natural way. So no longer, I don't think you look 5-10 years from now, are people, especially people who grew up in the TikTok era, right, that are used to doing this all day, are they going to sit and answer a 20-question survey about shampoo or deodorant? It's just going to be such a miss in terms of how their brains are wired, right? Yep. And now you have this incredible technology that allows people to interact with technology the way they interact with other humans. And as a result, I think that's going to become the de facto way that companies are going to extract feedback from humans is through natural interactions. And that's really what we're first trying to unlock through Suzy Speaks. Sure, Suzy Speaks is great because it transcribes what people are saying, but we're working on new technologies that can actually see what their emotions are when they're talking about something, or they're seeing things by computer vision and actually seeing the emotions that come out, visceral interactions, if you will. I think that's where it's all going, which actually reduces a lot of friction for humans to create feedback, makes it much easier, because we both know that when people are filling out 20-question surveys, there's no way their answers are going to be as fresh on question 18 as it was on question 1. But the people who are analyzing the research don't actually look at it that way. But ultimately, we're just humans, and nobody likes filling these things out. So I think the surveys will be going away. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No. Are there sort of legacy researchers who are going to hold on tightly? Of course. When I walked into Hershey Foods in 2007, they said that their brand would never stoop to the level of advertising on people's computers. You always have people that hold on. But I think that the growth and innovation curve of this technology is unlike anything we've ever seen. So I do think it will change the way that human feedback is collected at its core.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I've been saying it for quite some time that the future is the way we think about things is qualitative at scale, right? Yep. The form factor, the interaction will be what we think about as more of a qualitative approach. Yeah, and there'll still be. I still have a hard time imagining, let's say, a conjoint exercise not being visual. So I think there will still be some components.
Well, there'll be visual stimuli that the consumer will react to, but they're going to react to it the way a human reacts. So it doesn't mean they can't be looking at something visually to respond to it. I actually think this unlocks a better iteration of that.
All right, interesting. So on this topic, you've got a book coming out that is around that. And I should say, for me personally, and I think, all right, we'll get that in just a second. I still, personally, I have not engaged with AI from a voice standpoint. I'm just not there yet. I'm 54 years old. It just feels a little too weird. You would think that I would, because I was just
like talking to it. You don't feel comfortable talking to AI.
Right. We text, type all day long. But I don't feel comfortable with it yet. That still feels a little too.
Have you ever used Siri or Alexa before?
No, I have.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I do not. I have not adopted
not for everyone
voice interface. Yeah, but I also am firmly aware that is my own Luddite tendencies. That could be somewhat generational, could just be me.
Yeah.
If I understand kind of your point of what we're talking about in your book is, I'm going to just fall by the wayside, people like me, because this will be the defining technology, and generationally how people will engage. But I don't want to steal your thunder. So tell me what I missed in kind of your thinking about your book.
Yeah, so 10 years ago, I wrote a book called Youth Nation, and that was at the point where social media was really taking off. And the thesis behind Youth Nation was that young people were now in the driver's seat of the future of business and culture and society, because for the first time they had a voice, right? It was before that, whatever Clear Channel played on heavy rotation on radio became the songs people listened to, whatever the big 3 TV stations put on TV, they dictated culture. But now in the age of YouTube and Instagram, at that point, I had said that young people were in the driver's seat, and that has obviously turned out to be true. Yeah. And obviously with AI, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to create a similar, but in my opinion, much more structural and impactful shift that we're going to see in business, culture, and society. And as I got my hands on these AI tools for Suzy, kind of like a light bulb went off in my head in terms of, wow, this isn't just going to impact me or my company. This is going to impact every industry and every corner of society. And I start to just write down ideas of how it's going to impact society in terms of parenting, in terms of education, in terms of commerce, finance, the workforce, people's career journeys. And, I just had so much in my head. And I went back to my publisher, Wiley, who I'd worked with for the first book. And, they're like, yes, let's do it. And decided to write this book, Generation AI. And, the subtitle of it is Why Generation Alpha and the Age of AI Will Change Everything. And basically the book goes through a variety of the kind of the core pillars of our society, and tries to paint a future of what it means, and most importantly, what everybody should be doing about it. What should parents do to prepare for Gen Alpha, which is going to be the first generation that will know nothing else but a world with AI, right? What do people in the workforce do if you're a lawyer or you're an accountant and there's tools coming out that essentially just intermediate your job? Where do you focus next? What do you do? And I really tried to make the book in a way that really allowed people to take value home and really try to change or evolve the way they look at the world and they look at themselves and their professional journey. Because whether it's right or wrong or good or bad, we're not going backwards. And every company, large and small, is going to be faced with the choice of adopting this or really becoming, roadkill on the AI superhighway, if you will, right?
Yeah.
The same way Blockbuster was, and we know all the stories.
Yeah, no, that's great. So when's the book come out?
The book comes out May 6th, and it's already on pre-order everywhere books are sold.
All right. So encourage everybody, obviously, check it out. This is a topic that I agree, there is no going back, and we will only progress forward from here. And and that will demand change across the broader implications. We're just gonna have to figure out as we go as a society. But here we are. So
yeah. And I do talk about, I'm an AI optimist, but I'm also not blind to a lot of negative implications it's going to bring to society. And I do discuss those in the book as well. But I think every technology has positive and negative aspects that, it brings to society. And that's kind of the way life works, right?
Yeah.
So, but I definitely address those things as well. Deep fakes and things like that.
Yeah, definitely concerned.
And in the research industry, we are seeing the negative aspects of AI as well. You see bots and fraud impact panel quality. And, we've had our own issues with it, that we built a technology called Biotic to get our arms around it. But, it's creating a lot of, trust issues within the research industry, because you have these sophisticated bad actors coming in and replicating human voices and fooling brands that are trusting their research to make big business decisions.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago in the Grit survey, which I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with.
I read it every year.
Good, thank you. Well, you may remember about 2 or 3 years ago, because we talked about it quite extensively in the report, that there was a very large sample of bots, but they were very difficult. They were basically synthetic respondents. So the only way that we could identify them really was that the verbatims were too good. So so even a few years ago in the early stages of this, we were seeing that.
And now think about how far AI has evolved and its capabilities. If it was hard to detect then, think about how hard it is today.
So you mentioned voice. I mean, are you actually encountering fully AI generated voice respondents that are participating?
We have not encountered that yet, but we know it's coming. And, deep fakes and bots are invading the social media sphere. And it's only a matter of time. And we are getting ahead of it with Suzy Speaks by actually building our own patented, voice detection tool and technique, as well as facial recognition for humans. And it could be a separate business opportunity as well that we're pursuing.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. So the quite a few companies that are emerging in the panel space are incorporating video and audio components as part of the registration process, as well as going as you're participating in surveys. And we're just gonna have to do that. So
but I do think the voice of the human is going to continue to matter so much. A lot of people are talking about synthetic, but synthetic audiences don't know what it's like to ride a roller coaster or go to a great restaurant or fall in love or all these things. And I think that's what that emotional side of humans is where brands are born. Right? We're not rational beings when we buy things and when we interact with the world. And I think that's why humans and their voice will continue to matter. So in a world of AI, we're really doubling down on the human voice.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So I want to be conscious of your time as well as the listeners. We've kind of touched on the kind of our final question on lessons learned.
Yeah.
You certainly talked about pivoting and evolving and adapting. But what else? What would you add? Just kind of you as a leader, some key takeaways on lessons learned that you would pass on to emerging leaders.
Sure. So I think first and foremost, the power of your network is so incredibly important. When I launched Suzy, I didn't have any contacts in the market research industry. And the way I got it off the ground was calling people I had relationships with and saying, hey, would your agency or your brand mind testing this tool? And our first 10 clients were all people who I knew personally, because who else would work with a little known brand that to trust their research with? And that's just one of many examples where at times of transition, or times where you really need to lean into people, like with my book, your network is everything. And I think the best time to establish your network is at early stages in your career. I've made a lot of mistakes early on where if I didn't see a P&G or Nike badge on someone's shirt at a conference, I wouldn't sit next to them at lunch. But you never know where the world's going. And you really just have to be interested in everyone's journey, because it's a long road, and always put yourself out there every night that during the week that you can be at a company event. Go when you're younger, because that will expand your network, and you think you have a perception of what going to an event will be, but you really never know until you're there. And it just takes that one meeting to change the trajectory of your career. I think that's one. I think two, one thing I've done well as a leader is when I see talent, no matter how old or what experience somebody has in the past, I basically support them with reckless abandon, and I push them, and I build around them, and I build under them, because a 10x talent is somebody you should always triple invest in, because those are going to be the people who become the staples of your company. And I think a lot of times leaders look at that person and say, oh, they're too young and they don't have enough experience. Let's give them another couple years. But when you know, and that's always been a great thing. I think the third thing is, you can't let perfect be the enemy of good. Like, was Suzy Speaks the perfect product when we launched it? No, but it's already worlds better than it was when we launched a month ago. And now we're building with our clients. And I think, especially in the research industry, which so much obsesses itself on perfection and data, sometimes that can get in the way of innovation. And you find yourself 2 years later saying, why is everybody else doing so many great things and we're still doing the same thing? So I think you really just have to dive in, especially in the wild west of a business world that we're all operating in right now.
Sage advice, Matt. Sage advice.
Thank you.
So is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we have not?
No, I mean, it's I think that you run a great podcast, and I'm a big fan of your work, and I just appreciate the opportunity for having me on today.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And
Really?
And ditto, Mutual Admiration Society. And you have a podcast as well. So you've got a book. Where can people find you? Where can people listen to you?
Sure. So my podcast is called The Speed of Culture. It's in partnership with Adweek, and you can find it anywhere where podcasts are found: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. When we interview leading CMOs, it's twice a week. We've done over 250 episodes. It's been a great platform for myself and Suzy. You can learn more about Suzy at suzy.com, and more about me and all the other things I'm doing, including the book, at mattbritton.com.
Okay, very cool. Matt, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and best of luck.
Great work.
Thanks. And thank you to our listeners. We appreciate you taking time to spend it with Matt and I. We'll be back with another episode real soon. Everybody take care. Bye-bye.